Resolved, veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder should receive the Purple Heart Award. Traumatic brain injury is a medical condition just like any other physical tragedies that people reserve Purple Hearts for. The Purple Heart is described by purpleheart.org as an award given to veterans who have suffered through injuries during war. Post-traumatic stress disorder is an injury too. I lost me. It's just a mental one. Many veterans who come back for fighting for our country are committing suicide, being diagnosed with depression or other mental problems, and are not being recognized for the suffering they went through for us. All soldiers deserve that recognition.
Men, women, soldiers should be awarded the same benefits. They do the same training. They do the same preparation for war. They should have the same rewards. Don't rig a soldier of his benefits. War comes not only physically, but mentally too. RecognizeTheSacrifice.com states that post-traumatic stress deserves as much recognition as any other wartime trauma. Quote by, I don't see how somebody else can tell me that I don't deserve one. I may not have wounds on the outside, but I have wounds on the inside.
Resolved. Why should veterans get the Purple Heart with PSTD? Who says they train just as much for combat when there are plenty of soldiers who come back in body bags as well, and they served, and there are some people who get a shrapnel to the leg and then they just are disabled in a wheelchair forever, and they also have PSTD, but they also took a fatal wound from bullets, shots to the head, everything. Think, what if that was you? What about that was your family member? Think, how would this affect you?
And she never said the quote, the person's name, and it's not the same because, like, it's not an injury, it's just mental disability, and it's also not the same because, like, you don't know if they train the exact same way.
For PSTD, you never know if they got it during the war or after. It couldn't be. It might not be from just one thing. Like, well, it's a mental disorder, so I don't. It's not like getting hurt like for a bullet. It's not as serious. For being shot is more. Like, life is more affecting than PSTD.
I don't think that veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder should be eligible for the Purple Heart Award. The Pentagon Advisory Group decided against allowing the Purple Heart to be awarded to veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder patients because they said, quote, the condition had not been intentionally caused by enemy action, like a bomb or a bullet, end quote. The New York Times reports, this statement makes sense because RecognizeTheSacrifice.org states, when contemplating an award of this declaration, the key issue that commanders must take into consideration is the degree of which the enemy caused the injury. The point here is that the enemy did not intentionally give the victim PTSD.
The criteria for receiving the Purple Heart Award does state that it can be a mental disease caused by enemy actions. It also says that a wound is defined as a must-have required treatment by a medical officer. Post-traumatic stress disorder cannot be treated by a medical officer, rather a therapist. Therefore, PTSD does not meet the criteria needed to be considered a wound, which rules out the possibility of a Purple Heart being awarded to the victim. This all makes sense. PTSD is not serious enough to be treated by a medical officer. So a PTSD patient should not receive the prestigious Purple Heart Award.
All of these reasons come to a conclusion that the Purple Heart Award criteria should stay the same, and post-traumatic stress disorder should not be a vital injury. A victim of PTSD may avoid situations where they are reminded of the event. Don't we all avoid situations where bad memories arise? A victim of PTSD can still walk using their own legs or can use their own arms, not prosthetic ones that they now have to use just to live their life normally. Post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms can be reduced, but an amputated leg will never grow back.
Resolved. Veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder should receive the Purple Heart. Matt said that it wasn't serious enough to get it. Would you guys like to live your life scared every day? You never know what's going to happen. You keep thinking someone will come and try to kill you. There was a dog that was given the Purple Heart Award for trying and failing to save someone. But he gets it, and someone who has been through a war but might not be injured doesn't get it. When they talked about the Pentagon, why didn't they use a source? Couldn't they find one?
Resolve. George brought his own feelings into it, saying, I think. How do they know that post-traumatic stress disorder isn't a big deal? How would these people be able to avoid situations by going through their normal life and having images stuck in their head forever?
Our opponent states that PTSD is not as serious as other injuries and says that the enemy does not intentionally try to give us PSD. But PTSD is mainly given, is tried to invoke into our enemy, into our soldiers from the enemy. PTSD is very scarring. It keeps you from living out your normal life, fearing every single sudden sound that occurs.
My opponent says that PDS is not as not as important as getting shot with a bullet. But what about the all the other soldiers who take their own lives by shooting themselves in the head because they can't deal with the pain and suffering that they saw while in war?
Parker said that it doesn't you can't even walk for the rest of your life, but why does that even matter if you can't even think enough to walk or anything? And the Purple Heart says, mental disorder can have the same long-term effects as getting shot or getting injured, says the purpleheart.org.
Sergeant Nathan Scheller. He lived through 2 roadside explosions in Iraq. He was denied the Purple Heart twice. He suffers from cognitive problems every single day. Many people think concussions aren't a big deal, but 5 to 15% of concussions have long-term impairments. It's like adding insult to injury. The official list of wounds for award includes concussion injuries caused as a result of enemy-generated explosions. The ongoing resistance to awarding the Purple Heart to invisible wounds, the New York Times calls it the Black Heart instead of the Purple Heart.
Nowadays, you're more likely to hear about someone in the Army who was denied the Purple Heart because they weren't injured enough. A perfect example would be Ronald Agard. He was riding in a Humvee in Iraq when it exploded. He suffered a severe concussion and road rash, and his injuries didn't meet the criteria for the Purple Heart, so he was denied. And another truck got destroyed, and only one of those soldiers got a Purple Heart, even though 7 out of the 9 in it were hurt. Miller Zwerdling reports that Army commanders have routinely denied Purple Hearts to soldiers who have gotten concussions in Iraq, even though regulations say that the wounds are eligible for the award.
Resolved. My opponent said the Purple Heart is given to people who suffered during the war. Medicinenet.com said PTSD can be caused by kidnapping, mugging, or assault, not just being traumatized on the battlefield. It can be caused after the war, and it can be caused in the war too. But you can't just really prove that happened during the war. That's why I think it should be stayed the same.
Mackenzie mentioned that PTSD is just as bad as injury as a physical wound. But the Army classifies PTSD as an illness, not an injury. It may damage a person mentally, but that's not what the Purple Heart Award is for. It's for a physical injury. Secretary Robert Gates said, the Army classifies PTSD as an illness, not an injury, so troops with PTSD don't qualify for the Purple Heart.
Resolved. The Purple Heart is defined by Dictionary.com as an award given to people who have shed blood or have been wounded by the opposing side. My opponent said that people with PTSD from the war should be awarded the Purple Heart, but the definition of PTSD is a mental health condition that's triggered by a terrifying event, says Mayo Clinic. So PTSD is an illness, not an injury. My opponent even said herself that PTSD is a mental illness. I feel bad for the soldiers with PTSD, but PTSD does not fit with the definition of the Purple Heart Award given by the founder of the award and the founder of our country, George Washington.
Quentin and Matt, you were saying that it's for an injury. The definition that I found for injury was an act that damages or hurts. There's nothing on there about mental or physical illnesses.
Resolved. The Purple Heart should be awarded to veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, so it says on ncbl.hlm that post-traumatic distress disorder is a type of anxiety disorder. It can be caused by something traumatic that you've seen, such as fire, assault, prison stay, flood, domestic abuse, rape, terrorists, and war. So it has to be something to do with it. And obviously, if the person went into war and if they had a stress disorder, they wouldn't go into it because they know it causes more stress, and they would. And if you do have post-traumatic distress disorder, the same website stated that you are afraid to leave the house and other people contact you, you're afraid to live life, so you wouldn't want to go there anyways.
We should give the Purple Heart to veterans who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder because it's still an injury, but it's mental in your head.
The Purple Heart is a prestigious medal. This will be taken away from the sheer numbers of PTSD people diagnosed wrongly. Why should soldiers with PTSD get benefits and people who have been through worse, like rape, not get these benefits? If we would give soldiers with PTSD the Purple Heart, we would have a lot of bills to pay as taxpayers. Because in the last 6 years, 20% of all soldiers deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq have PTSD, said HealMyPTSD.com.
If we would pay for all the people who have served and got PTSD, we would pay $660 billion. The war at this point has only costed $500 billion, said Medscape.com. This is taking away from the serious physical injuries that soldiers face.
My opponent said that all injuries are the same, so then why can't a person with a physical wound be able to do day-to-day things like a PTSD patient's? Physical wounds are permanent and can ruin a life and dreams forever.
Resolved, should the Purple Heart be awarded to veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, aka PTSD? I believe they should. Traumatic brain injury is just as serious as a wound.
My opponent said that it should be awarded to people who have shed blood on the battlefield, but it was made to recognize every soldier for his or her service. It was to acknowledge their courage and their valor in battle, and the cost that they paid to serve their country.
PDS is most veterans come home with PDS. It's from seeing a horrible or scary event that happens to you. Yes, the Purple Heart is for injuries, but people that have PDS are scared to leave their own homes by the time they end up coming home.
My opponent says, you have PTSD during the war, it's after. It's not a mental wound. It's mentally disordered. It's not like you're being shot. And my person on my affirmative team said, it is like being shot. sometimes they take their own lives. The Pentagon said they shouldn't give it to PTSD sufferers. Trainers must take into consideration the enemy didn't cause PTSD. It did. The person was so scared of the enemy, so scared of why they were out there, why they were fighting. They held back their emotions. They went blank. They got PTSD because of all the trauma, the bloodshed, the weapons that they saw. Wouldn't you be scared of that? I'm shaking right now because I know I would be. To see a man next to you be shot down, lay on the ground, dead, lifeless. You're so scared, so frightened that when you come back home, you're jumpy. You don't know what someone's going to do, when they're going to do it, and you're afraid there's someone lurking around the corner that's going to shoot you. Sometimes you take that by yourself. You shoot yourself. They say PTSD is not traumatic enough and it's not classified to get the Purple Heart. It should be classified. It is strong enough and it hurts enough that it should be classified as a wound because it scars that person for life. It's not like an amputated leg. No, it's worse.
According to dictionary.com, PTSD is a mental illness, not necessarily an injury. Even my opponent states that many soldiers come back from Iraq or any war with PTSD. Why should a Purple Heart be awarded for something like that?
Purple Heart Award is awarded to someone who is injured, not to someone who is messed up or not. And I don't know.